we get into any of that, as usual, for those of you listening or watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it if you can. Comment down below with anything you'd like to see us talk about or hear us talk about in any next episodes. And for those of you listening on Spotify, Apple, or any other podcasting platform, please follow and give us a 5-star review. It helps a lot with the algorithms and pushing us up to more viewers and more listeners. All right. So let's get into it then. We'll start off with the North London derby. Happened on the Sunday, but we'll obviously go through Arsenal first so we can get into the Man United stuff all in one group. So obviously Arsenal won 1-0, a goal in about the 64th minute against Spurs. I'll be honest with you, a pretty good game for the neutral. I know that it was pretty exciting kind of end to end. There weren't a massive amount of like real clear-cut chances for either team, generally speaking, but it definitely was quite a cagey game in terms of like it really being competitive and both teams kind of really trying to push each other to the limits. Tottenham obviously started a lot brighter than we did. I think they had pretty much most of the ball for the first probably, I don't know, for at least the first 30 minutes, but probably even longer than that. And really had Raya kind of scrambling, made some good saves. I do remember a header obviously also going past the post that had Raya really scrambling across the goal mouth. But it was looking like an all Tottenham kind of affair. And then Arsenal started to get back into it. Got some stuff on the counter. Martinelli had a good chance that he really didn't do enough with. I do see a lot of people hammering him, and we'll get onto that a little bit later. But it wasn't horrible, but he just probably should have been a bit more clinical. And maybe if it was Trossard, he would have done so. And then obviously before half time, Solanke's header came in, very close to getting in the inside of the post. Second half continues very similar kind of fashion. Van de Ven, good header, good save from Raya. But then the exact thing that I think all Tottenham fans were afraid of happened, right? The infamous Arsenal set piece now has become very infamous for kind of the Salisbury tactics that we do during it, but also the effectiveness that we have against a lot of teams in scoring from it. Obviously, our set piece coach, shout out you, my guy. You're doing a great job. Keep that up. But Gabriel rises above old Romero, dashes him out of the way. Romero kind of doesn't even look really bothered, and he manages to get a very clear, open header straight past Vicario, who may as well not even be there for set pieces, really. And that kind of ends up being the decisive action during the game. Nothing else really happens from there. Maddison gets hooked early. See some Tottenham fans talking about that, not very happy about it. But yeah, there's not really any threat from there. You could call Tottenham kind of impotent from there. They didn't really do very much. Not really anything happened. Nothing really happened from there on out. And Arsenal go ahead and get the win. So 1-0 to us. Very briefly, I'll just say overall, the game was not great from us. We weren't, I don't think we were very good, generally speaking. But I don't think we really needed to be very good. Without Odegaard, without Rice, we obviously knew that we were going to lack something both on the defensive end and on the attacking end. But generally speaking, I think we just managed to grit our teeth and get through a game where we knew Tottenham were probably going to have more of the ball, but that we just needed to be defensively compact and solid and kind of wait them out, because eventually they're going to, huff and puff and run out of steam. And that is basically exactly what happened. We took our chances, though, which is always great to see. Outside of the Martinelli chance, obviously, the Gabriel chance is really the only other big chance I can really think of for us. And we put it away. So, Gabriel continues to score, continues to be kind of a standout defender in our team. Got to put more respect on his name. People are trying to replace him in these combined 11s and stuff, trying to put Van de Ven or Romero in ahead of him. I think you really got to put some respect on Gabriel's name, both on the defensive and on the attacking end, because I will say he was better than Saliba in that game yesterday, in that game on the weekend. So put some respect on his name. But outside of that, I just think, it's 3-point collectors. Let's move on to the next game. It's exactly what we needed to do before, a tight couple of clashes against Atalanta and then against Man City. So I think it was exactly what we needed, but I'm not going to overdo it and say too much about the game. I think generally speaking, we showed more experience and showed that we were probably the team that's further ahead in their journey, further ahead in a lot of things. I think real questions need to probably be asked about Tottenham at this point. I think was it 7? What's it 7 losses in the last 11 games or whatever, and just imploding on the in post-match conferences. Everything's going a bit nuts. some real questions need to be asked, Tottenham fans. You really need to ask some questions of who you're buying, what kind of style you're playing, because over here we ain't having them problems, son. So, but anyway, what do you think of the game, mate? Did you manage to watch it? Did you enjoy it as a neutral?
Yeah, I managed to watch it. Managed to get home in time and just find a couple of hours to just relax and watch a game. It was kind of the main game of the weekend for me. I didn't really manage to catch the Southampton United game live, so this was the one that my schedule allowed me to watch live, and I was excited for it, man. I kind of expected it to go the way that it did, and I think it was. I agree with you and kind of disagree with you because I feel like it was a cagey game. And I think that the atmosphere around North London derbies is always one where you feel excitement. You kind of don't know what to expect. But I will say this year, I did kind of, I'm not trying to do some Nostradamus thing. Like, I did kind of know what to expect. Like, I really expected you guys to come in, be solid, and defend from the front and try and score a goal from a set piece, or maybe try and get something from a corner or a counter attack, and that would be the way that you guys were going to win or get a result. And it kind of went that way. And I feel like this Martinelli stuff, that's so harsh. That wasn't really a gilt edged chance. Like he had a lot of running to do with the ball, and then if he scored from there, you would say that's a bloody good finish. So I feel like
Yeah,
people just want to run agendas on Martinelli and be unfairly harsh on him. Like Trossard, number one, you said about Trossard, right? I get your point. Trossard would have never had that chance because there's no way he's going to be able to run off the shoulder and get the space to have that shot. So it's a moot point. Like he wouldn't have created that. That just wouldn't have existed for Trossard. So I feel like Martinelli had a good game, man. Him and Saka worked their nuts off defensively, which I think was which was their number one priority for this game. Arteta definitely said, "Let's fucking go, guys, and defend. Like you need to defend more than attack." And I think you saw that from the wingers, and Saka in particular. Some of the track and back he was doing was top tier, man. And I know, wingers, you're praising wingers for defensive work, but I'm sorry, in big games like that, even back in the days, you needed some of your attacking players to work their socks off and go the extra mile, help out defensively. Otherwise, you're not going to win. Very rarely do I remember like big derbies or big top of the table clashes being decided because of a team just completely outplays the other. Of course, it happens every now and again, but most of the time they are these kind of cagey games. And I expected this from you guys, and I think it's I've seen some Arsenal content creators kind of really praise it, and I agree. If it was me and it was my team and I've gone through the kind of trajectory you guys have gone through, where, let's be real, I'm not trying to mock it. You guys were being rinsed for half a decade at least, maybe longer, for being kind of spineless and, what was it, ever a little boys and all those kind of jokey type things. But they were rooted in the fact that Arsenal was soft. Like after your really strong team and the Invincibles and stuff, Wenger bought a team full of really technically strong ballers, but not with any grit. And this Arsenal team is not that way. This Arsenal team is more throwback, like George Graham, early Wenger days, where your defense is hard as nails and your attack is very, very functional, and they've got substance. What we talked about last week, right? I know Saka. I'm not saying Saka's not and Martinelli are not, ballers. They are ballers, but they focus more on substance, which is why I think Arteta can say to them, "Come back and help out your fullbacks," and they do it because they know it's going to help the team rather than their stats. And so, yeah, man, I thought you guys did great, and I understand where you're coming from in terms of it doesn't matter how we win or how we get a result, we get a result, and I appreciate that, and I feel like your back 4 or 5, minus Ben White, who I think didn't have a great game. The other 4, amazing performances. Timber was top. Gabriel, I feel like I can't keep raving about him because people are going to say, you're an Arsenal fan, closet Arsenal fan. Gabriel's top, man. He's top 5, maybe top 3 defenders in the league, and people keep essing on him. They need to give him they need to get past the agendas, get past some of the early bozo moments he had, and just recognise his form from the last 3 years. The last 3 years, if he had a ponytail and he was Dutch, you'd be talking about him being generational and one of the best defenders in Premier League history and all this waffle. Like that's the level he's reaching. I know we all Saliba praise Rolls Royce. I think Saliba recovered in this game. He had a dodgy start, right? Solanke, was kind of ragdolling him a bit in the first 20 minutes, but he came back and Saliba was really good for the rest of the game as well. But Gabriel didn't put a foot wrong the whole game, and it kind of like it spread to the rest of his back four and his goalie. Raya was good as well, and I just feel like it was unbelievable performance, man. And yeah, Romero. But now we get up to the Tottenham part. Yeah, if I didn't have sore throat or some illness, I'd be going absolutely ham on them because absolutely bottle jobs. I never want to. And the thing about Romero was I actually think he was better in that second half. Before he conceded the goal, he was winning some tackles. He was kind of like he was snuffing things out for Tottenham. And I would have come on this pod if he didn't have that moment and say he did all right. This was one of Romero's better games, and then he goes and has that moment. And I listened to some Tottenham content creators talk about it. Quite a lot of their goals conceded this season so far have been because of him.
Have been from him. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Like nearly all of them have been from him. So I don't want to hear any of this Romero chat ever again. Like he's a defender that can be good on his day, but he's not in these combos that they're trying to force them into. I'm sorry. He's a decent top 4 defender. He's no more than that. And World Cup winner, all of that stuff. Thank Messi. Thank your midfielders. Thank Alvarez. Thank those guys. Thank Emi Martinez for penalty shootout saves. That's where it's come from more than... I say that with Lisandro as well. That they can't get plaudits for that. So, yeah, for this game, Spurs were massively disappointing, and you guys just executed the plan to a T. And I feel like Arteta's got to get massive praise. Your back 5 got to get massive praise. Even the midfielders, man. Partey and Jorginho held their own. And I thought there was no chance they were going to be able to hold their own in that midfield. And they did well. And yeah, I mean, Havertz was okay.
Maddison was missing, bro.
Yeah, Maddison as well.
I'm not going to put it down to them either. Like, I'm not going to put it down to Partey and Jorginho locking them up. But I mean, coming out of that game, what I wanted to hear was Maddison had been kept quiet the whole game. Because let's be honest, if Maddison's not playing well, that Tottenham team doesn't really play well. I'll be honest with you. Like attacking wise, they don't really create very much. Brennan Johnson, Timo Werner type of stuff. Like Son is really the only, outside of Maddison, really the only chance they've got. And he's not really all that creative, right? He's maybe going to create some stuff for himself and he'll be able to put away good finishes if he gets in good positions. But generally speaking, if Maddison is not, if Maddison's not creative, then they don't really have anything to do in that, in the attacking half. They've got obviously Porro and Udogie trying things, but without Maddison firing, it kind of neutralizes a very big weapon they've got. And obviously Jorginho and Partey did a good job on that. I will say Trossard was not.
He wasn't great.
I know he was filling in. He was filling in, right? He was filling in that role. So I'm not going to go too ham on him, but he wasn't great. So like it definitely did make a big difference not having Rice and Odegaard in there. But had that been a Man City or a Liverpool, or even maybe even like a Villa, I think they could have done something with us, right? They could have got a couple of opportunities here and there. But just Tottenham, like I said, impotent, man. They haven't got anything about them, and like it was probably the most comfortable last 30 minutes of a match where we've been 1-0 up in a game where we're not having, the better of things. It's the most comfortable I've ever been in that situation, right? If this is even against Man United, Chelsea, whoever, I'm worried. I'm still worried that you might do something. But that Tottenham, like that's the biggest disrespect I can give to them is like, we went 1-0 up and that was it. I knew that game was over and Tottenham had nothing about them. And I think the thing that you mentioned about Arsenal being soft underbelly, no backbone for like a decade essentially, is exactly what Tottenham have right now. There's nothing about them, man. Like they haven't got any grit. They've always been like that, but even more so with this whole Ange thing and like trying to get a bit more passion and all this other stuff into the game. They still don't have anyone in that team that I really fear is going to really do anything and pull them out of the mud. Kane would have been the one that I'd worry about more previously, right? Because there's a world-class striker, he can do what he wants. But even with Son, man, and I'm not saying this is a disrespect to Son, but like he's getting a bit older now, and even him, I'm not too worried about him getting an opportunity. When we're 1-0 up. So it's probably the biggest disrespect I can give to Tottenham, but they don't have anything about them that makes me think that they're going to be able to come back and claw themselves out of a difficult situation.
This ties into I agree with you completely. This ties into literally what we were saying last week and the style over substance stuff. Maddison was like that. He had some good touches. He was stud rolling the ball to galore. You would have got absolute payouts from all the bookies if you'd bet on 4 or 5 stud rolls from Maddison, because he was doing that all over the shop. But it was nothing at the end. And you're right, like the way this Tottenham team is set up, it's youthful. And they could become a good team. But right now, they haven't got any creativity. Like I was watching Kulusevski and Maddison get the ball, and they looked good on the eye, and they were cutting in, and they were, they had nice touches, they were doing little nice shimmies and all this kind of stuff. But realistically, I didn't fear for you guys at all. I didn't fear that they were going to create something, because you're right. I'm not even dissing Son. Son has always been someone who needs chances created for him. Very rarely has he done something for himself. Like, I mean, at least not in these latter years, past 30. Like, he's become a player who's an absolute gunman. And if you give him a chance, he'll score. But you need to give him chances. And it was poor, man. And I think you're right. Against a better team, and I think the key is, against a team with a more dynamic midfield, you would have struggled more with Partey and Jorginho. But that Tottenham midfield was, I don't know what Andrew's smoking. Because, Sarr didn't start, right?
He didn't even
start.
Sure I was shocked.
I was like, the one midfielder that has dynamism and that will really test Partey and Jorginho. They didn't even put him on, and this is not because Bentancur said some racist shit about Asians, but he's got nothing about him, man. He's soft. He's absolutely soft, and you can't rely on him to do anything. So you needed Basuma, you needed Sarr in there, really, I think, for them to really give you guys problems. And the Basuma one was an injury, fair enough, but the Sarr one, that was Ange's fault. And he flopped that, man. Let's get on to the Timber thing, because I've seen some people chat about it. I was telling you about it, obviously, because you were in China watching the game, right? So you had different commentary. But like Jamie Redknapp and a bunch of people were going in and saying, and Paul Merson, to be fair, so it wasn't just a Tottenham bias thing, were saying that Timber should have been sent off or could have been sent off. What's your opinion? Do you think he could have, or do you think they're trying to create a narrative?
I think it's absolute bollocks. I don't think even the foul was a yellow card in the first place. I think that was a shocking decision. I think it's pretty clear that he put his foot on the ball in a kind of Cruyff turn-esque fashion, and he wasn't running into the challenge. Everyone wants to say it's like a 50-50 in that, but they were literally like, both of them almost jogging into the challenge. It wasn't like they were both sprinting to the ball and sliding into each other. It was literally just kind of running into each other with very little momentum. Timber puts his foot on the ball. Podro tries to kick under it, and then obviously as a result his foot lands somewhere on Porro. But even then, I very much doubt it was anywhere near enough for Porro to go down and roll on the floor for 10 minutes, right? So I think that first of all was not a yellow card. So if you want to say the second one was a yellow card, then that's totally fine, right? But then I don't want to hear anything about him being sent off, because that first one itself was soft. If you want to give it even as a foul, fine, but that was not a yellow card, right? Based off of the position on the pitch it was in, it's not like Tottenham had some big chance to break from there. Timber had not had like 15 different fouls before that, and he wasn't, in my opinion, doing anything really truly dangerous. So I don't think it was a yellow card in the first place. So if you want to talk about the second yellow card, go ahead and talk about the second yellow card. Yes, you can probably argue if you grip someone up, even if they do run at you, it could be a yellow card, right? It's just like in primary school when somebody used to throw something at me and I've dashed something back. I knew I was going to get shouted at as well, right? And I'd argue I'd even get shouted at more for retaliating because I'm supposed to be rise above it and all this other box. So fair enough, Timber deserves a yellow card for that second action. But the first one itself, I doubt even was a foul, let alone a yellow card. So I don't really want to hear it. Add on to that all of the other stuff that was going on previously, like last week with Declan Rice getting sent off. I don't want to hear anything from anyone about fairness and what should have been a red card, a yellow card. Can you imagine in a North London derby, that soft of a challenge and that soft of an action being used to give a red card? Like, it's disgusting. And I understand, Paul Merson wants to say it, and I don't really get where he's coming from, because a lot of other stuff I've heard him say is kind of like throwback to old school days where he wants people to double foot each other and get away with it kind of stuff. And now he wants to use that. I don't really get where that comes from. Jamie Redknapp, very clearly a soft individual, and he's a biased Tottenham fan, right? So I'm fine with Jamie Redknapp saying, he can say that all he wants. If you asked his dad, I guarantee Harry Redknapp would say, "F off, that's not a yellow card." So out of the two of them Redknapps, I know which one I prefer. So I don't really even want to talk about that. I just don't think it was a sending off. I don't think it was a yellow card to begin with. And if Vicario, if he double footed him and Vicario came up to him, then fine. I'd say, yeah, Vicario, you got to back your boy. But Porro's dropping on the floor. If Vicario goes back and watches that replay, he's going to feel ashamed of himself, because that was not something to be jumping up to someone about, right? Even in a North London derby, that was not the challenge to be getting onto people about, right? So generally, from that opinion, I completely disagree with it. Being a sending off. If you want to give a yellow for the second action, fine, but the first one wasn't. So I don't know where you stand on it, but that's kind of where I'm at now.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't think it was a red. Definitely not red. I get why they give a yellow. But I feel like I kind of agree with you. That's probably quite harsh as well. And overall, yellow is probably fair considering all of the actions that happened afterwards. On the Vicario thing, I think you might be a bit harsh, because I don't think, obviously he hasn't seen the replay, right? And he's just seen Porro rolling around, and he's assuming that probably there's been more contact. So I get it. But he's just ramping anyway. He wasn't about anything. As soon as Timber grips him up, he backed off.
But that's what I mean. If you're Emi Martinez and you're actually about that life, then go ahead and do it. But Vicario, mate, you can't even come out and push people out of the way to get a cross. What do you think you're going to do to Timber? Timber's like 2 feet smaller than you, and he grips you up like you were a child. So Vicario, leave it to Romero or Van der Ven. You ain't about it, all right? You don't see David Raya coming out and gripsing people, because he knows he's not about it, and Gabriel and Saliba will do that job for him. So Vicario,
Ben White,
I get it. You're a tall guy, but you're not about that life, right? Go to the gym, put some muscle on, learn to catch a cross, and then you can start chatting to people.
I feel like Gary Neville was on him the whole game, by the way, on our comms. He was absolutely ripping him to shreds. But part of the things he was saying, I kind of agree. Like, Vicario looked really nervous, and his whole demeanor was he was very fidgety. And it gave off a vibe of him being very nervous. So I feel like that was just in keeping with that behaviour. So I'm not really onto him. He needs to work on his game, because he was a weakness that you guys targeted. But in terms of this incident, I don't think it should have been a red card. I think Redknapp and Merson are just... I don't even blame them so much. I just feel like the rules and the way things are being officiated has pushed people to... They're now looking for any kind of thing... to try and call for red cards and offsides and all kinds of stuff like that, and it's not that hard these days, right? Because of the ways that the games are being officiated and the way the laws are set up. I think you can have an incident, 1 or 2 incidents every game, that you could try and debate in this way. I will say some of the Curtis Jones comparisons I've heard are absolutely ludicrous.
Stinks to the high heavens, man.
I literally, for some of these people posting about it, I watched the video that they share of the Curtis Jones incident, and I go, am I losing my mind? Like, all right, sure, it's slightly similar because the person's studs on the ball, but in terms of the contact with the player, they're completely chalk and cheese. Like, Curtis Jones absolutely clamps my man, and with your one, Timber literally nicks him with the side of his boot. He doesn't actually hit him with the studs or anything. So it's like completely different case. And it's just people coming out crying, getting the violins out, saying that, Arsenal get special treatment compared to them, or Liverpool get, worse treatment compared to other people. But it's a joke thing. He deserved to get sent off in that game. Curtis Jones I'm talking about. And this Timber one was a stretch. I don't even think we should talk about it more than that, to be honest. I feel like that's what it is.
No, I'm done with that. Yeah.
Let's talk about Ferdinand calling Arteta Pulis then, with this tactics.
Yeah.
Rio's been moving brazy. I swear to God, he's been on
he's getting progressively worse, man. I don't know what's going on with him, right? Like, I saw that picture of him at Burberry yesterday getting his guns out and that, man. You need to settle yourself down, all right? Get off the TRT or whatever testosterone replacement therapy that you're doing to try and do all the stuff that you're doing, and just settle down, man. Like you're past your career. Stop doing too much. You know what I mean? Like I understand where he's coming from, right? And I know that he's also trying to like jab at us because I think it's very clear to this point, right, that Man United players, especially the ones that were successful under Fergie, enjoyed it more when we were a bit of a joke, right? Because it was funny and they were kind of they had pity on us, right? Because they were like, "Oh, you lot are crap. You know, even if we're crap, we'll allow you." The fact that we've been challenging, I know we still haven't done anything really, especially if you're going to talk to a person like Rio Ferdinand about trophies and stuff like that. We haven't done anything in that regard, but it's definitely that is the point to me. Is like he doesn't need to worry about us. I don't know why he's trying to like get jabs at us and you know try and rile our fans up because you know the Man United fans and Man United players will be the first ones to tell you, you know, you need to do something before you start chatting to any of us, even if we are in down periods. And we haven't done anything yet. So the fact that Rio Ferdinand has to come out and try and make, you know, fun of us or try and rile our fans up kind of shows to me like he probably sees us as more of a threat than he really should. Right. If we were winning trebles or whatever else, fine. But like, where's that energy for Man City? You're not saying anything to them, right? Even Liverpool, you're barely saying anything to them either. So it just to me is like kind of cheap. And to this point, like I'm not really listening to anything that he really says anymore because I know for the most part he's just trying to jab at us, right? Like I rarely hear him talk about Chelsea, right? I rarely hear him talk about a lot of other clubs that are in the mud. It's mainly the Arsenal that he wants to talk about, and I know that that's kind of the dynamic with him and Joel Bayer, right? Like that's the Man United fan and the Arsenal fan, so he has more of a target to talk about. But I just feel like he's doing too much, and he just needs to calm down because I'm sure he was the first one during our down periods where we were soft to say, you lot need to learn how to defend. And as a centre back himself, that was paired alongside of a Vidic type of defender who was clamping people. And let's be honest, was a real throwback type defender. It's weird for him to come out and try and like put people down because the best thing about Pulis was the defense. Like, like you can go and say what you want about his style, but the only good thing about it was that he was a good defensive unit of absolute brick houses that would stop you from playing the football that you wanted to play. So I don't really get where it's coming from.
Here's the thing, right? The premise of what he's saying, I agree with. The exaggeration that he's used, he's obviously
the part
doing
where he's trying to rile people up. Yeah.
Yeah, he's putting more, too much dip on the chip. Like he's going way further. Like, he could have just compared Arteta to Mourinho.
Yeah.
And everyone would go, oh, great. Okay, not the best style of play, but he wins. And he's doing it to win. And essentially that's what Arteta did. Going Tony Pulis is a bit, it's not even a bit, it's low. And he's obviously doing it for banter and he's trying to rile up the Arsenal fans, like you say. Because Pulis won nada, and you're not fighting relegation, exactly. and you haven't got Rory Delap throwing in bloody long throws and stuff like that. So, but Rio is what he is, and he's like everyone else in this space, bro. And this is the thing: we hold him to a different standard because he's an ex-pro and because he's one of the best Premier League defenders of all time. But at the end of the day, he's a content creator like everyone else, and he's trying to create content. And he's trying to, get headlines and do whatever he's doing. And so he goes for the Pulis shout. But yeah, the only thing I will say, and this is not aimed at Arsenal fans, is this is aimed at everyone else kind of critiquing or praising Arsenal for this style of play and performance. Just hold the same energy when other people do it as well. That's all I'm saying, right? Hold the same energy if at some point Maresca does it, or at some point Ten Hag does it, or some point Slot does it, or some point Ange does it. The teams that are not at the top, right? The ones that are trying to find a way into Champions League, or maybe they're going through some drama, right? Because I know if Ten Hag done this, he wouldn't get any praise. Certainly, it would all just be. It wouldn't be the Pulis shout because that's an exaggeration, but he would still be getting lots of skepticism for playing this way. So, and I think that's not really fair, but I don't think that's aimed at Arsenal fans. That's aimed at everyone around it. Let's just understand that sometimes you've got to play that way, right? Because I think often the thing that's thrown at Ten Hag and thrown at other Mourinho before, and who else is some other managers, Conte and stuff like this, was
Conte, yeah.
you know, this style is archaic and all this stuff, and there was very little credit given when they would, you know, S-house their way to a win and play in different ways. And I'm not saying it about you, because you've always said you wanted Arsenal to have a variety of different styles to play because you're going to need it. And I agree, you're going to need it. But I think sometimes when people talk about, you know, and we do it all as our own fans, but when we talk about our own manager, we kind of only look at the good stuff and they go, oh, Arteta's got this beautiful style and it's very Pep-like. Now, man,
Yeah.
Arteta's actually mad varied. And in the first 18 months to 24 months, you played like that more than you played free-flowing football. And so now we're looking back on things and we're going, oh, Arteta deserved more time because we're thinking about the recent block of 18 months to 24 months when he's played free-flowing football. But, you know, he's able to S-house it with the best of them. And I think that's Rio's overarching point. He's just gone too far with the Pulis thing. But it's just the point that, you know, some managers, although Arteta's not the one for this, are poster boys for the media, and people get given, you know, they get given a bly for everything. Arteta's not. So I'm actually glad that he's getting praise for this. He should get praise for it because you know what? That is some victory. And he did it without 2 of his 3 or 4 best players. So let's not go Pulis, but let's give him some Conte and Mourinho praise on that style of play, because that's the style of champions. All right, you haven't got there yet, but if you win the league at the end of a year and you've played like this 3 or 4 times away at your biggest rivals and got results, you will be able to point at those games and say that's where you won it.
But this is the exact point I made. No, I know we need to move on to the Man United segment, but I just want to say this, right? Like, as I've said before, and as you just pointed out, I've said we need to have various different styles depending on who we come up against, right? Not everybody plays the same way of football, despite the fact that Pep has basically ruined football by making everyone try to play out from the back, high possession type of football, right? But not everyone plays in that way. You know, sometimes we need to be able to dominate the ball. Sometimes we need to be able to sit off and let somebody else dominate the ball. And I think that is the only way that you can really be a successful team in not just in the Premier League, but in Europe as well, right? Like when you come up against Real Madrid or if you come up against Man City, they're two very different styles of play. And, you know, even Pep has to adapt depending on who he plays, right? Like the best managers have to adapt. Not everybody can just enforce their style of play on everyone. And I agree with you. I don't think Ten Hag would have got the same credit for the same kind of result. But I will say that we've, you know, any of these Pulis shouts that you want to go and give, I guarantee you next game we'll play different. Or not next game because it's against Man City and we probably will have to play similar.
I think next game you'll play the same.
You know, like in other games we play very differently. Like against Atalanta, you think we're going to play the same way as we played against Tottenham? I doubt it. I think we're going to play with, you know, a little bit more style to it, depending on, you know, who we set out in the starting 11. But generally speaking, you can't go and say, oh, that's how Arsenal play, as if we play like, you know, the performance against Tottenham is the performances that we put in every single week. Like, you are one of the first people to say that Arsenal back end of last season, just before like everything went balls up, were by far the best looking team, right? We played the best football. We were the most attractive, not only defensive, but we also could play really nice going forward, right? And then we showed against the Man City. I know obviously people diss that performance as well. And, you know, you've got to go and beat your biggest rivals if you really want to win the league and all that bollocks. But prior to that, we had a really poor record against all big 4 teams. So for me to go and see that we're able to go and defensively be solid against one of the best teams ever, I'm happy to see it. So like, that's my biggest point, is if everybody wants to say that we're some Jose Mourinho house football, just go back and watch some of the performances that we put in earlier this season, last season, whenever else for the last basically 24 months. Go and have a look at what we were doing, because we didn't play like this all the time. So before anyone tries to pigeonhole and say, oh, Arteta is such a shit house, it's just so disingenuous. And the fact that you don't, I mean, obviously you see what you're doing, but the fact that you can't recognize that Arteta obviously has various different styles of football, some of them attractive and some of them not so attractive, is just, you know, it cheapens the whole argument, and it shows that there's so much bias in whatever you're saying. Because, I mean, is that not the biggest criticism that we have of Ange and even sometimes Klopp, right? That they couldn't change their style of football. They had heavy metal football, high line for life. It looks great, but in the games like this, it don't do anything. And everyone's the first point. We're all the first to point out Ange needs to be able to change it up, or Klopp couldn't change it up at the right moments, or whatever else to get across the line against Man City. So we're going to go and do, when Arteta actually shows that he can switch it up, we're going to go and crucify him for it and say that he's Tony Pulis. Like, it's just, you can't win. Like, it doesn't matter what you do. No one's ever going to be happy because it's very clear we're all biased and love our teams, and we don't want anyone else to do well. Just the way.
No, just give you guys props, man, and we should wrap up there on Arsenal.
Yeah,
it was a fantastic win, and the style of play does not matter because, like you said, that's not indicative of how you guys play week in, week out. It was horses for courses, and you won the race. So big up Arsenal, man, and big up your defense, big up Gabriel. Big up your set piece coach, and yeah, shame on Tottenham because they bottled it, they flopped it, man. And if you can't get up for one of your biggest games at home, boy, long season. And I think they are going to have a long season.
It's going to be a long season.
It's going to be a long season.
The Ange downfall.